Welcome, coaches. We're set to have a great discussion on practice planning with Bob Braybrook.
Thank you, Blaine. It's always good to get at this, and I think that as we get coaches, so I want to say welcome to you coaches that are able to come on and take part in this. It's really a valuable thing, I think, in terms of our coaching. And when we come to realize, sort of why planning is the key, is sort of the foundation for us as coaches, we become much better coaches. I think we settle down and we coach confidently, and I think that's an important part.
And right off the hop, Bob, why is planning so important?
Is really important. I think that the players, to start with, see that you have a strategy, or you have a method of which you want to teach. And I think by displaying that confidence through your planning, they understand that you bring something to them that you want them to learn. And I think it also speaks to the parents. And lots of times, our greatest challenges is helping parents understand the direction we want to take their son or daughter and their team. And so I think the planning part is really important. It's also, there's an accountability piece to say that really we're not just out there winging it. And we're very fortunate in Saskatchewan, but I find this in many places, across the country, that we have good hockey people and people who meaningfully come to the rink because they care about the development of the game and about the players and so on. So it really is important that we display that. I think it gives direction for you as a coach. So I think that plan shows that direction. We're going to talk about this as we go here, but the responsibilities are made clear by having a plan. So if you have the luxury of having 3 or 4 or 5 coaches on the ice with you, you make those responsibilities clear in the plan, and it gives you the opportunity then for everybody on the ice, all the coaches, for example, on the ice, to know and be confident in what you want the players to learn and what you want the team to do in that practice.
So let's dig into the nuts and bolts a little bit here of building a practice plan. So what are some steps required to create a good plan?
It really starts with having a goal of what you want to accomplish in the practice. I'm a believer, and it doesn't always display it in the typical templates that we have availed to us, but I'm a believer that every drill should have a goal or an objective. So I think having a practice goal overall, but then having sort of what you want to achieve out of each of the drills that you do in the practice is very important. I think it sort of gives you the opportunity for selection of the drills to pick the things that you want to help those players to achieve. So if it's starting your practice with some skill work, and I think that skill work can lead to tactical play, and depending on the level that you're at, it may then be able to lead into team play. And so I think that's an important aspect of a really good plan. Good plans also, allocate time for each of the drills. Good plans have, sort of a name of a drill. And most of us as coaches are stealing ideas, gathering ideas from other places. It's okay to put your name on it. It's okay to say this is what we want to accomplish, as long as we're doing that tailored to the level and the development needs of our own players. It also it allows us to sort of, having a plan allows us to know how we're going to transition from drill to drill to drill. And as we talk, in a bit here about the layout of a practice and the typical, so whether you're doing stations and so on, you'll know exactly what you need to do in between. So if one coach is back at the rink diagram or rink board, or is describing to the players what they want to do, other coaches can be setting up. And that just is efficiency within the practice.
Let's kind of roll into the benefits of now having a practice planned out.
I start with thinking about skill development, and I think all the time that we have, we have a number of players on the ice. We may have half ice practice. Sometimes we're in smaller areas rather than a whole ice, or a whole sheet. And I think we with our plan, we sort of look at can we get a maximum number of touches? Can we get players to go through activities multiple times to strive towards mastery. And success comes with them being confident and be able to do it, but also confidence comes with the success that they have in doing it. So that's a first part I think about is, emphasis on skill development. I think there's work to be done in terms of how efficient we can be in our practice, and it comes by planning. Most of the time we have limited time. We have at least at the more higher levels, but I think at every level we're doing some more of our off ice warm up things so we can maximize the use of the ice. But I think if we reduce the amount of time that we have players standing around, as coaches in our planning, if we're aware of the length of time a player is in the lineup, we can look at it. At the upper levels, we call that work to rest ratio. So, we're looking at how much time a player is in working versus how much time they're actually resting. And can that be more game-like? And at the higher levels, that's really kind of a focus. At the lower levels, we want max participation. I think we create an environment that is fun and engaging. And I think that positive environment comes through a plan. As coaches, we model and we sort of demonstrate the things that we want. We want players to be excited to be there and to be having fun. And I think when they're having fun, they're learning. Sometimes it's just knowing what you want to achieve. And as coaches, we have the goals of the practice. Maybe we have the goals of that drill, but we maybe have a vision overall by having a plan to say, overall, what do we want to accomplish? My guess is that most of us as coaches really sort of deal with and are faced with a wide range of skill. Whether it's in boys hockey or in girls hockey, there's always differentiation. So a plan allows you to differentiate, to be able to say, maybe we have one coach or a group of coaches that's working with some beginning players or some players that are just sort of needing more skill development. And then we have other coaches that are able to work with our more advanced players, and they're all moving along. They're all learning, they're all participating, and they're all finding success.
I would add on that too, Bob, there are times too when you're delivering a drill and the kids are just getting it and they're really enjoying it. So it's kind of like, well, maybe I can deviate from the plan and we can go a little longer with this one because we're really getting the benefit, that key point that we wanted out of this drill.
I agree, Blaine, and that's where if we put a time on a template and that you're working on in terms of your practice plan, if you said 10 minutes for that drill, that very thing could be you need to revise at the 4-minute mark because you're not reaching what you want to achieve with the players. Or, as Blaine just said, maybe we just need to go a little longer and maybe we just need to have that. I always encourage coaches in a practice plan to overplan, to have a little bit more so that if things are really smooth or things need to be adjusted, but we need to move on, that you've got a little bit more there. And know that not just off the cuff, oh, what are we going to do now? It's more, what did we have planned and what did we think about leading into an efficient and successful practice. There's a player focus, I think, that comes along with our plan, and I think that if we can prioritize sort of the experience we want our players to have, maximizing their learning opportunities is important, and I think that really is a key. If we can take a athlete-centered view, our plan allows us then to think about, okay, if we're working with specific skills and we know that a certain number of our players are going to be challenged with that, I mean, it allows us to focus in on what those players need. And I think that's really important. And I think for a lot of the time in practice that players come, my teaching background told me that when we got kids at the rink, maybe it's as early as 3:45 or 4 o'clock in an afternoon, they've already had lots of time seated in the daytime and they want to move and they want to get out there and get active. And so that's some of the challenge for us as coaches. When we have a plan and it's a well laid out plan, we can efficiently use the time and get them moving as much as we can and learn by actively doing.
I know you touched on a little bit about stations and, if you had 3 or 4 coaches helping and stuff like that. So um, let's talk a little bit more about how to best utilize the ice surface and your staff.
We understand the game is played in a small area. And so I think that you look at it in terms of your plan of, do you have some of the, the borders or the areas that you can, or things that you can put into areas that will divide ice up. And whether it's the actual stations that you're doing in those areas, or whether it's kind of the activity that you're doing and the use of that, it could be cones or sticks, or the, most rinks now have those
The rink dividers. Yeah.
that they can utilize. But I think it's really important for some other reasons. One is, when we're teaching, we want to locate our coaches specifically in areas, one, that they're going to be safe. So as you get up where kids can shoot the puck a little harder, we want to put coaches in locations where they're not going to get hit with a puck inadvertently, but also for coaches to be in an area where they can provide feedback. And with a well laid out plan, you may have key teaching points that you want to emphasize in that drill. Those coaches can be there to emphasize those teaching points, and maybe be, helping individually with players in the plan. So the execution of the plan comes through, real good location of the coaches.
So there's some things that sort of get, let's say, they fall to the lower end of priority when we're planning a practice, and we don't give enough love to our goaltenders other than we're going to shoot pucks at them. So there's 3 topics here, Bob: goaltenders, improving our checking skills, and the benefits of small area games. So let's tackle the goaltending piece first.
It's a luxury for us to have somebody who's a specialized goaltender or goaltender coach, but we don't have that luxury exclusively for full-time when we have our players on the ice. So I think it's important for us as coaches, one, to get some background as much as we can in teaching the basics of goaltending skills and get an appreciation for the position, but also just trying to incorporate your goaltender in everything you do. And I know that there's many resources out there where we are able to use formations on the ice where we're teaching skating, and that might be at the beginning of a practice. We can use that same formation for goalie specific skating or movement skills. We can do things that are specific to our goalies, whether it's just a block of 10 minutes at the beginning of a practice where we do specific skills work for them, while we're doing other specific skills work for the other players. We just want to have coaches understand, if we can be a much better coach by just emphasizing what our goalies may need, and an understanding in terms of planning for them. I think goalies will perk up, and I think that's, oftentimes their parent is maybe their only coach that's showed an interest in them playing goal. And your goalies will really appreciate you when you are planned and incorporate them into the practice plan. So it's nothing really in the specifics. I think sometimes we are intimidated by something that we don't know. There's lots of information out there. There's specialty clinic and goaltending as well that we encourage you to take, and all of your coaches should be participating in that. In terms of checking, this is a tactic. So it's a combination of things that you need to do to become a checker. And so skating becomes the most important thing in all aspects of the game. If we can skate, we more easily learn to check. And so that combination of skills of skating, body positioning or position before possession, and then putting yourself in a position where you can free the player from the puck or free the puck from the player, depending on the level that we're talking about, and then maintain possession of the puck. So there again, it's can you start your drills, for example, with a stick lift and then start into what you're doing in your drills? We can incorporate skills within drills lots of times that would make our practices more efficient and more skill driven, even though we're into tactical play. And so that combination of things is really important. And checking checking, that's the things we want to do. Every young girl or young boy wants the puck. And we know that even at the highest of levels, that the best players in the world in a 60-minute game would have the puck on their stick less than a minute. And so we want them to be able to be good at it, but we also want to be good at going to get it. And I think that's an important part, is that once we get into from skills to tactical play and then towards team play, we want those things to sort of build together. And checking is a key component of our game that, as Blaine was saying, we don't give enough love to, and we don't sort of emphasize that enough in terms of our skills work. Then finally, I think when we incorporate or pull it all together, oftentimes the question I get asked is, can we teach hockey IQ? Can we teach game sense? And I really believe as our players become more skilled, we definitely can teach that. And one of the best ways to teach it is throwing those players into game-like situations. So the game is played in a small area. So when we have structured small area games that we can put players into, whether we pull nets closer together, we put nets across ice, whether we're doing things where we're having compete things out of a corner or out of a net front or in an area on the ice, there's huge benefits to allowing players to play and experience. Sometimes it's experiencing failure, and sometimes it's learning from what they see. Sometimes it's learning from what they do. So in the small area, again, we maximize touches. We can make many small areas in an ice surface where we can put smaller numbers of players. More repetition can happen in that time, and we can make those small area games more game-like. And so I just wanted to clarify game-like just while we have you here, is that everything that we do as coaches, as we practice with the players, can be deemed game-like. We don't have to throw our players into 5-on-5 all the time. The mistake we make is we jump into team play way too soon. We need to consider, do we have the skills necessary? Can we combine those skills to the tactics and those components that we want to teach, and then lead them into play, because they'll learn then from playing in that situation. So I think game-like becomes really important as we are developing the skills and the tactics that make the game so fun.
Now, I think another thing that is really important for coaching is why it's important to conduct a post-practice review.
Well, I think when we have a real, solid practice plan, many coaches now are using an electronic format, and so they're actually able to share that practice ahead of the practice time with their coaching staff, often with their players. And so if you kind of know what your objective of the practice is, as we mentioned earlier, once we get to the end of the practice, if you've had your coaches located well in your practices, they've been out there to provide feedback, they can assess ongoing in the drills. When you get to the end of your practice, I think the best 5 or 7 minutes you could spend is together as a coaching staff, talking about how well did our players, how well did our team do those drills, and did we achieve what we set out to achieve? So now it's kind of a measure, even by observation, of how did the players do today? How did we do today, even as coaches? So that assessment at post-practice doesn't need to be lengthy, but I think it's a huge requirement that we should put on ourselves as coaches, because we're busy people. We have, maybe multiple kids playing sport and are active, and we just don't take the time to sit down enough. And that might be in that post-practice review, in the assessment of how these players did in this one. It might help us to pre-plan and get started into the planning of our next practice, or even into the strategy going into our next game. And that's the kind of thing I think that we can incorporate and collaborate with coaches. And oftentimes we hear in the clinics that we do is that we appreciate the collaboration, we just don't have time. And I think we need to make the time to do that, and then do a good assessment on where we're at and where we need to go.
Any final thoughts, Bob, on practice plan that we can share with the coaches in Saskatchewan?
You know, I'm very fortunate to be in the rink a lot, and I get to mentor and work with coaches a lot. And I think it's so appreciated when you walk into the rink and see a well-run, well-organized practice where players are actively involved. And I think that's a huge compliment to our coaches out there that are planned. And so I believe that the best coaches in the world are the best planned coaches. Doesn't really matter what level. And so planning becomes really, really important in terms of executing what you really have in terms of your vision and where you want to take your players. So if we can put some tools in the hands of coaches, if we can get coaches planning and collaborating, it makes our game better and it makes it more fun for our players. And when they're having fun, they're learning.